What's up, guys? We suck so much at that. Welcome back to the Imperfect Podcast.
Welcome.
Really, it's welcome back for us because
Yeah.
it's been pretty much a year. I actually was looking back at the last one we sent out.
Okay.
Was also back in March of last year.
As you can tell, we're pretty slow with these things.
We did say last year that we were going to do a lot better in bringing more episodes out.
But we didn't specify what year.
We didn't
just said we're
specify
gonna do
what
better.
year. But we are imperfect at keeping our promises.
Hence the
we
name
did
of our podcast.
really bad. We're trying to make a change.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
We're trying to make a change. Pastor Michael Jackson, he called to me from the ether and said, it's time to make a change.
Time to make a change.
Look at the man in the mirror. So that's where we're at.
Anyways, we are back officially. Happy New Year to all our audience. It's 2025. Here we are again. But my name is Akko, and
I am Steven.
And this is the Imperfect Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're testing out with a little bit of video. So if you're watching us on YouTube, welcome to our journey. If you're listening to us on whatever streaming platform you're listening to this on, thank you for tuning in. I'm excited, Steven.
This is going to be good.
What we got cooked up? First off, how have you been, man? How was last year for you?
Dude, last year? Oh my gosh, man. Last year was so much just with school. If you guys have been listening before, I'm in grad school for chiropractic.
Yep.
And it has been an absolute whirlwind of just school and school. I think I was super busy and now I've kind of slowed down. Mm-hmm. It's going to start picking back up here pretty soon.
Yeah.
But got to, travel a little bit with my family. We ended up going to Colorado for Christmas, which was so much fun.
Okay.
I'm a snowboarder, so yes. Shout out to snowboarding, screw skiing.
Actually ski. I prefer skiing to snowboarding.
But it's just been a year. It's been a year of we've transitioned into a different community group with just new guys we've meeting for the first time, and so getting to know them has been really good and also challenging, as everyone in this group is married except for me. We're trying to change that, but in that regard, we're trying to change that.
So if you're listening to this and you're single and ready to mingle,
that's hilarious,
and put a ring on it. I'm just teasing, man.
In that regard, it has been it's been interesting to kind of navigate through that as the group or the community that we were with previously.
Okay.
It was a lot of people were younger, so we had more free time.
Yeah.
And in this, people are married, and it's okay, how are we gonna still make the commitment to come with one another? It's it's interesting seeing the transition from college age to even more in adulthood as more things get piled on.
See.
So that. Man.
All right. So last question, looking back to 2024, and if you could have a statement or a word that could kind of capture last year as a whole, what would that statement or word be?
That I would capture it with. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. I would say release is a really good word. I think there was in terms of leading a group and releasing this is stupid, but the leadership of that group and trying to pass it on and also learning from that as well, and releasing other people to make the decisions in that regard was tough, as well as there were I was trying to get into this group at school. It was this fraternity, and I really thought God was opening up a door for me to kind of walk into that. And going through the process of getting into it, I realized, okay, maybe this is not the right decision.
Yeah.
And kind of wrestling with that aspect of things of holy crap, I really thought God was leading me in this way. What do I need to do to kind of let go of this and stay content in this decision?
Yeah.
So there's a lot that kind of went into that, as well as releasing any sort of responsibility I may have felt that I missed out or I was failing God in that regard.
Of course, yeah.
So,
and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening or even watching this might be feeling the same way, or even thinking that, wow, I would love to hear more about how he handled that or navigated through that, because I might be going through that right now, or I just walked from a season of going through that. So
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it another time.
Yeah, for sure.
But you got something to talk about. Some new people or a person to talk about.
Yeah, I know. Well, this time last March, I forget what we were up to. We were just gotten back from Kenya. We had gone to Kenya the Thanksgiving before last year, so in 2023, came back, and I think me and Aaron were full-time, like getting onto parent mode or just being parents. If you guys don't remember or you don't know, Aaron ended up becoming a mom, or we ended up becoming parents in April of last year. So right around March time, the belly was popping, and we were just in full-on preparation mode to become parents, and we got blessed with the most beautiful child. Baby Nia got born in April 11th of 2024. She's actually pushing up to be a year. In about a month's time, she's going to be a year, which is exciting. Crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about. Like, a couple of things, a couple of highlights. She's the most beautiful thing in the world, and she's such an amazing bundle of joy. And every single day that I wake up, I basically sign that contract to be a father all over again. It is both the most rewarding job that I've ever had, but also the most time consuming, the most it's hard. I'm not even gonna BS it or even like put any filler terms to it. It's a hard job to have. It's a hard responsibility to bear. It's a hard season upon season of life to go through. And it's one of those things where I've told people that I've engaged with that once you become a father or once you become a parent, you can't relinquish that title. You can't stop being a parent. And it's one of those things where this little bundle of joy, and sometimes most of the time it's beautiful, and there's sometimes it's stinky and disgusting, and to get the diaper change and the poop and the diarrhea. Oh my goodness! A couple weeks ago, she had the worst diarrhea.
The worst blowout.
Oh, not just blowout. It was blowout after blowout, bro.
Oh my god!
I hold my hands up. I fed her spicy food.
It was the pasta.
Oh. I made some shrimp Italian sausage pasta, but the Italian sausage was spicy Italian sausage. Fire. And this girl, she eats everything. Literally anything and everything, she will put it in her mouth and she'll swallow it. She's like my dog Nala. Nala, I have a Great Dane dog outside, and the Great Dane, when I feed her every single day, we've had to get like a bowl that has the creaks in it to like make sure that she doesn't just swallow the whole bowl.
Inhale it.
She doesn't just inhale it. Like, they have no taste buds. I'd be bringing, I know I'm going deep in a tangent, but I'd be bringing like bacon and like different types of exotic meats to give to them. They don't even care about chewing it. They sniff it, they like it, they swallow it. And Nia is like adopting that tendency. They're hanging out too much, because she's at the stage right now where she'll see it, she'll sniff it. If it smells good, she swallows it. Yeah. But anyways, all that being said, it's just the best job. It really is. And having a great community and a great friendship and a great church, amazing people around us, amazing family, even though our families are a little bit far away. It's been really precious to grow as a husband, but also as a father. And I'm going to be sharing a lot about that experiences with you guys. But man, I think 2024, that's my 2024. It's been full on parent mode. So as far as actual things that I did, places that I went, I took a step back in a lot of different things that I was a part of, as far as leadership, as far as service. And my leadership was my family. It was my wife and it was our baby. And just cultivating that intimacy and building it up, and starting to write our own storybook of the Akko story, or the Akko family. That's what we were focused on. So it was a precious time to be away from the mundaneness of everything else outside of this house. This is actually our home, by the way. So for the audience that's watching this, we're in that living room. So it was really good to be selfish and focus on my family while being that selfish. But yeah, man, I think that's kind of how my year kind of went and wrapped up. So
I guess real quick, and hopefully we can touch on it super quick.
Yeah, for sure.
For a lot of parents, not maybe every single parents, but I know like the first year can be like a real struggle. Sometimes it's year 2, sometimes it's year 1, sometimes it's in the teenage years. But as and I know Nia has been, for the most part, a good baby, but there are obviously times where the weight upon you just kind of drags you down or pushes you down at 3:37 in the morning. Right? Where it's just dark. And so out of all of that, where have you found like that joy? What is that joy that you're like, no, this is actually a great job?
Well, it's funny that you said that, because the word job, I'm using it very intentionally, because for people that know me, like here in the Kansas City space, and even my family, I haven't loved my job. I've been working at my current job for the past 3 years, and I'm starting to build a little bit of a tenure through it. But I really do not like my specific job and just what I do. And a lot of it has been from actually where I'm sitting right now. I usually set up this desk pops up, and I put my computer and all my workspace over here, and I go to work here at the house. But it's just been really draining when it comes to my mental health, as well as just being a good husband. And I'm going to start with husband, because, even before the baby came, this was the situation that I was in, and all the stress and all the anger and all the frustrations that built up got poured into my wife. So it was really, really getting to the point where it was becoming very, very toxic and very hard for me to just have a sane mind, and one that I was able to pour into others. Because one of the worst things you want to stay away from is when you start having a doppelganger life, where at your work and in the office you are a completely different person, and then when it comes to church and community and family, you're somebody completely different. I was starting to see that there's 2 different versions of Akko in this world. There was a version that hates his job, is so stressed out, is so ready to have something different come up to his life. And then there was the Akko that was being looked at as a leader, as somebody that was a mentor, as somebody that was so involved with church and was always smiling a lot and always loved on people. Anyways, all that being said, when the baby came, it was almost God saying, hey, I know the situation that you're in is not the most ideal. I know you want to do stuff outside. I know you want to do this, that, and the other. But I've cultivated and prepared this space and this season for you so that you can be able to fully invest in this baby that's coming into this life. I would say 99% of my work has gotten away from, I say 99%, obviously the percentage is a little bit lower, but I still have my job. I still get to do my job, and I still have the privilege of working and, bringing an income into the family. But my joy is filled because when I look up, there's a little baby, playing around right in the corner. When I look to the side, when I'm in my Zoom meetings, there's a baby sleeping on this area. When I'm trying to lead a call, I'm having to mute myself and yell at the baby to stop yelling and stop laughing, because she's watching something that's very enticing. It's added this layer of so much joy and life-giving emotions, because I get to do my job and I get to work from home. I get to be with Nia, and I get to develop those intimate moments. I know a lot of families, specifically a lot of dads, that have been robbed the intimate years of parenthood, the first 2, 3, 4 years, because they have to be the ones that leave in the morning to go to work. They're the ones that don't come home until 6 p.m. at night. So all that being said, I know I dragged on that a long way. It's been such an amazing opportunity. Yes, there's some difficulties in being a full-time parent versus and working, as working from home. But when you're able to pause and recognize the beautiful moments within them, and I physically have seen Nia change from when she was 3, 4, 5 months, and now she's 10, 11 months. She is her own personality. She's her own person. And I look at her, and we're having full conversation. I understand nothing, but we're having full conversations, and she's understanding me, and she's demanding things, and I'm like, where were you? You were so different 4 months ago. Anyways, it's been good, bro. It's been really good, and I can't thank God more enough for the family that I get to have, and the way I get to be a parent, and the way I get to grow through all that, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's definitely been some rough patches that we can go into deeper as we continue. talking about what we were talking about. But anyways,
Yeah,
it's been good.
I really love how you like, and for those who are like first listening, like this job that Akko has had, he's had it for, what is it, 2025? So what, like 3 years?
Yeah.
Pushing
3.5 years.
Yeah, 3.5 years, pushing on 4 at the end of this year. And
yeah.
At the end of the day, it's not a passion, it's a job for Akko. Like, it's not a passion.
Very much a job.
And I've definitely felt the impassion through the job. But I think it's so cool that, like, had you not stuck with this job, had you, like, decided just to walk away from this job, you may not have been granted the opportunity to have this opportunity to connect with Nia in this way, and to be able to lead in different aspects. And we've talked about it before, but the fact that you got to sit at home and disciple, a guy from our community group, most guys are like, well, I'm working from 9 to 6, we can't do that. And this guy, like, he's a younger guy, so his schedule's whack. Because, he's a college age dude. Like, they don't have real schedules. They don't have real schedules. Right? So, I think that's, really beautiful to get to hear and see of, like, okay, there are things that suck in life, but you like to take a military way of saying it is like, when you embrace the suck, there is so much beauty that came out of it, and so much that you got to do from that. And I think that's super cool.
I really appreciate that, and I thank you for bringing that to light. And for me, it's been a battle. The same way I asked you, what was your word for last year? For me, it's been the same word for the past 3 years, and that word is patience. And I know you were waiting for me to say it, but I feel like every year, I'm learning about patience, and it looks like each going into the end of each year, I'm like so deep, and I'm like, oh, I've learned all these different layers of patience, and I've learned so much from the previous year. And then once the year ends, I go to the next year, 2 months, and I'm like, oh, I'm right back at it. There's so much more.
There's so much more.
And I know that probably doesn't make sense to some of you guys, but all I'm trying to say is I've been struggling with patience for 3.5 years. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But anyways, all that being said, Steven, why are we here today? Why did we decide to wait until March 2025 to kick this back up? What have we been brainstorming and going through this past couple of days and weeks?
Yeah. So, I mean, we made a promise to ourselves, and as well as Aaron was the one who was like, we should, kicked off the podcast anyways, and we're like, let's wait till Nia can crawl away from us and entertain herself.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
We made up a list, and it's funny how God works. Is like, there's a line from the rapper No Big Deal where it's man makes plans and God laughs again. It's actually such a good line. Yeah. And I feel like that's exactly how I feel right now, because we had made a list of topics that we want to talk about, and in these past 3 weeks we've been getting hit with conversations nonstop, situations all about leadership. And really trying to tackle, why should we even care about leadership?
Are we even like good leaders?
Yeah, are we good leaders? Like why is leadership even important? What even makes a good leader? What does it look like to lead well? And what does it take to even achieve being a good leader?
Yeah. And how do I navigate through the thickness of, stuff's got to get done, and I'm either gonna lead the way as we get this stuff done, or am I gonna follow somebody who has taken that initiative to get this stuff done?
So I'll let you kind of take the charge on, like, I mean, not to go into specifics, but what were those conversations that you've been seeing in front of you that are like, wow, this is all about leadership, like this is nothing to do with anything else, but the main crux of what we need to address is leadership.
I'm glad that you swung it over to me, because for me, it starts with the individual. It starts with me. As I've mentioned to you guys, I am, a new father. Me and my wife celebrated 3 years of marriage, so relatively new in our marriage. But it feels like, for me personally, it doesn't feel like, I know for me personally, it's been a series of just engaging with different peoples and different individuals who are looking to get married or are already married and are looking to just connect and commune with me and my wife and what that looks like. So for the past years, ever since we moved to Kansas City, it's always been, how can we take our next step in leadership, right? To take fun off of the church that we go to. They love, how can we take our next step? And that's the Christian, that's the Christian walk. That's called sanctification. How do you take your next step to get closer to God, right? How do you take your next step in your relationship with Jesus?
Right.
So for me personally, it started off with my marriage. Actually, started off with me. How can I take the next step in my leadership? How am I leading myself? What are the cadences that I have in my life, as far as my job, as far as my physical health, as far as my mental health, as far as my spiritual health? What are the things and the steps that I'm taking to make sure that I'm progressing rather than regressing or even being stagnant? Because let me tell you this, in the leadership world, being stagnant is regressing, right? So that kind of poured out into relationships that me and my wife were able to build at church. Right. It poured out into the relationships that we were able to build with our community. It poured out into the relationships that we have with our families. And specifically kind of going into what we're kind of opening up for you guys in this new series that we wanted to begin. Yeah. It's all been within the last month. I guess not month, last calendar year. For me, a cool thing that I got involved in, kind of getting out of my cocoon from last year, being selfish with my family and our baby and just being a dad. I started serving more at church, and the area where I'm serving, I'm now a cafe manager. I help, make coffees and serve breakfast sandwiches and breakfast meals in the morning for our church members. And going into that role, it was very different from what I wanted to do. The last part of leadership that I wanted to be in was in the kitchen or at the cafe. I already spent enough time in my own kitchen making food, but I've never made coffee for anyone before, as far as like the way a barista would do it. So going into that season of my life earlier this year, it was really scary and challenging for me personally, because I was like, well, actually, it wasn't even scary and challenging. I was being very negative towards it. I was like, I don't want to serve in the cafe. Like just last year, I was mentoring these guys. I was the morning manager when it came to helping out at church. But cafe, like, I don't want to be in the cafe.
You're becoming something beyond
coffee. You know? But I'm gonna leave that there, because the story has kind of evolved into such a beautiful narrative that we're gonna touch on as we continue this series that we're leading. Because I've been able to pour out my skill sets and my leadership skill sets into so many different people that are going through different things in their different seasons that they're in. And I've noticed, wow, my leadership qualities have been called out so much this year, or this past 2 months or 2 weeks, than they have been the whole of last year. What does that mean for me? How am I navigating through this? How am I responding? How am I, challenging? And does my leadership look more so like somebody who's managing, or does it look like actual active leadership, right? And what is active leadership? So all these different things, are what personally I've been going through, and I'm really excited to kind of share my thoughts and share what I'm learning, and share even some things that I disagree with you guys for the next couple of weeks or episodes as we continue to go through this. But that's for me. What about you?
For me, it's not the same. I'm not a cafe team lead. I'm not
trying to recruit this guy, but he's like, every time I see him, he like turns around and walks the other way. It's actually so funny. Like he mentioned that we have a church a marriage community group, and so it's actually kind of, they don't even come say hey to me anymore, because they're like, oh, next, if we go see Akko, he's gonna ask us to come help him out. We see him stressed at that cafe. I'm like, no, it's not like that at all.
I come say hi to you. No, but anyways, for me, it's been okay. So for me, like in chiropractic, I want to own my own practice, and so that's something that I'm very conscientious of when you own your own practice in your career. That is something where you don't. I've experienced offices where if you blame your employees, that's when culture gets really bad. That's when the Gen Z term, the vibe of the office feels bad. And so ultimately I've, dedicated myself to learning, okay, what is it that makes an organization or a movement run smoothly and actually feel like a well-oiled, not just a well-oiled machine, but one that's like a joy to be a part of.
Okay.
And when we kind of undergo leadership, you're now starting to take responsibility for things that are happening around you, right? Especially as if you want to own a business, you have no one but to blame but yourself. And there's a book that I just read called Boundaries in Leadership. Very, very good book by Dr. Townsend and Dr. Henry Cloud. And one of the things they said was, when you are a leader at the highest level, you are ridiculously in charge.
Yeah.
Ridiculously in charge. And that was something that was really interesting. And again, as we could dive into this series, I'm going to expand on that. But that was something that's like, that is so true. And how they broke it down. We actually had a conversation about this in our group just this past week.
Yeah.
Of, hey, we're struggling like to figure out what does leadership look like in a marriage. And again, we'll touch on that later. But culturally, we have a very warped perception of what leadership is and how it's been presented throughout history. And then it's very opposite of how even Jesus displays his own leadership.
Yeah.
So there's that regard, as well as talking about the legacy of what leadership does and what it's supposed to do. There's, and this is just kind of where it is at school right now, that fraternity I was referring to. It's a 4-year grad program, and so there's a high turnover of people. And the fraternity itself has never changed its core values. Never once changed its core values or what they say they stand for. But the members have changed, and over time, I've noticed the reputation or the public perception of this group has shifted in the span of 9 months due to how they walk, how they talk, how they interact with people.
Okay.
And there's nothing that this group has necessarily changed. Like, what I've looked at their core values, they want to be leaders of their community, they want to be great at what they do, they want to be family men, all of those things. Yet somehow, mysteriously, the public perception has changed of them. And so it's really interesting of how the leadership has been passed on and the dynamic is starting to change.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's been a fascinating thing to kind of watch from beyond. And that's kind of where I've been interested in leadership, as well as my mentor, Daryl. When we first started coming together in our discipleship, he was pretty quick to say, like, my discipleship, we're going to go through leadership. I was like, okay, that's what we're doing, that's right?
Good. Yeah.
And so we ended up reading a book together. We didn't get to finish it, but read a book called Spiritual Leadership by Blackberry, I think, is the book. Very, very good book. Yeah, very good book. And so that's where, from my side, where I'm kind of coming in with this leadership thing.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to throw it to you as the audience. Like, what are you guys thinking about when you hear us kind of wanting to introduce this topic of leadership, right? Like, in your mind, or as you're listening to this, are you confused about being a leader, or do you see yourself more so as a follower? You know, are you a healthy leader, and do you think that you're really proficient and advanced in the way you lead because you have a huge community group, or you're really high up at your office or your business, or whatever the case may be,
or you're married,
exactly. you have
kids,
you have kids, you know, or if you're questioning and you're curious and you're like, hey, there's some areas of leadership that I've seen and experienced, and I don't think I agree with that. I don't think it was biblical leadership, or I don't even think it was healthy leadership, let alone, you know, whether or not it was biblical.
Right.
So the reason why I'm saying this is because the way we wanted to address this series, or this topic, because it's such a large topic, and bear with us, we're not the most eloquent when it comes to like explaining.
Oh, no.
We're not smart. I mean, this is the imperfect podcast. No. There's definitely going to be some areas that we talk about that's going to be purely from our experience and perspective.
Yeah.
But we're going to do our best to make this we're going to address this from a biblical point of view, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to share some areas that we struggle. We're going to share some areas where we're still growing in. But saying all that, the way we wanted to kind of form this topic series is we had a couple of episode series or sub episodes that we're gonna kind of be touching on. In addition to this episode that you guys are listening to is our intro to leadership.
Yeah.
And within that, we're gonna walk through the series through 5 different areas of leadership that we're running to touch. So we're gonna kind of go back and forth. So you wanna take on the first episode or area that we're gonna be touching on?
Yeah, I'd love to. So the first area that we want to do is, like, before we start kind of evaluating or judging leadership in different sectors, whether that's in the church or in the family unit or in your career, we want to set a foundation of, like, what leadership even looks like.
Yes.
What does it look like to, what is the tone? What are the requirements, so to speak, or what are the rhythms of a good leader? And how do you kind of seek that out?
Yeah.
And I think that's super important no matter what we do, because it's really easy to point out, like, oh, this person sucks at being a leader, but if you don't have a good grasp of the undercurrent and the hidden part of leadership and knowing what makes a leader, you won't appreciate it for what it does, because you will be like, well, this person sucks, or you'll think leadership is a very sexy thing, right? And it is sexy in its own way, but not in a very glamorous sort of way.
Or even it can be, but it can be skewed. You know?
It can be skewed 100%. And where I'm coming from that is we call, like, Jesus the cornerstone of our church, and that's not a sexy place to, the sexy place. You're in the dirt and you're in the mud.
Yeah.
You know, you're holding everything up as the leader, as the source. Where the sexy part is the church bells or the steeple, like it gets shown in front of everyone. But that's not necessarily what leadership is, right? And I think that's a really great place to start and kind of clear away those misconceptions about leadership, as well as kind of lay, no pun intended, but the groundwork for what leadership is supposed to be.
Sweet. So foundations.
Foundations. Yeah.
I like that. So after we kind of touch on the foundations of leadership, I think the next area that we're wanting to explore is, okay, what about the cost? What does this mean? How does this impact me? Or what are the positives and negatives within leadership, right? And within this, we're going to kind of introduce the concept of spiritual warfare, or leadership within a biblical lens. So a lot of times, kind of like how you hinted at, is leadership sexy? The culture might say, hey, it's so easy to be a leader. It's so easy to be an influencer. You just have to open your phone, turn on TikTok, come up with a topic that is somewhat enticing. Next thing you know, you have 100 followers. That's 1,000, next week, and 10,000 the week after that. So why is leadership so easy? And is there a cost to becoming a leader? And what does that look like, right? And then within that, all right, what does spiritual warfare look like? How does Satan find his way through leadership?
Right.
How does God find his way through leadership? How can we use a biblical lens to differentiate, okay, this is a godly way to lead versus this is a worldly way to lead that's leading us into a deviation that's going to send us down the bottom? Because a lot of times the more enticing areas of leadership, a lot of times they're just deviations from the path. Because like you said, leadership is supposed to be dirty. It's supposed to be raw. It's supposed to be the cornerstone. Like, I love that term, because when you look at a home, how often does your eyes go straight to the cornerstone? It really doesn't.
It does not.
You look at the yard. You look at the way that it's polished. You look at the backyard.
All the amenities.
You look at the cars that are on the on the driveway. In Kenya, where I'm from, there's this thing where you can tell how rich a person is by how many cars are in the driveway. Anyways, but the cornerstone, right? Like the foundation, that is really going to tell you the heart behind this leader, the heart behind this home, the structure and the strength behind the rebar that's supporting all these beams and stuff. So, anyways, the second topic or episode that we're going to be touching on is very much that, the cost of leadership, right? And how spiritual warfare plays a part in this, and how, using a biblical lens to view godly leadership based on the one true word or deviation that can lead us into worldly leadership and what that looks like.
And I think that concept of the spiritual warfare and cost of leadership plays perfectly into kind of where we see that come into play in terms of the hierarchy of leadership, of where you have specific leadership positions like elders and deacons and pastors in the church, as well as the volunteer team leads that like who are running the cafe team or curbside, or even if you're leading your own community group. Like, how does that all play in? Like what is the cost, and what do you have to pay forward in order to step into this? Right. And I think that's really important to understand, as we say, like the cost of what does it take to lead people, right? What does it take to move people onto God's plan, right? And as we get larger and larger, as we expand the reach of what our leadership is supposed to be, what does that look like in terms of how do we manage people well, or how do we lead people well?
Of course, yeah. All right. What's our next topic?
The one after the hierarchy of that actually leads in perfectly with that hierarchy, as you are expanding, is how do we lead well during change?
Okay.
How do we lead well during change? How do we, when we're given, either as a church body or as a family unit or as an individual, as we're going through that change, as God gives us that vision or that prerogative to move forward, how do we move well, and how do we start shifting ourselves to be in the correct place that God wants us to be?
Okay.
And how do we be kind in those moments and not crush ourselves through that?
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. So if we're following along, we have the foundation. That's our building block.
Yep.
And then we have the cost of leadership, right? And spiritual change, or spiritual warfare, and what that might look like. And then, as you just mentioned, we have the hierarchy of leadership, right? Viewing and noticing that progression of from the individual one-to-one to the community to the church to the big church, capital C, and then leading through change. You know, how do you individually anticipate change and experience change within that leadership, or even how do you see change from a worldview or a bigger factor and react or even act while all that's happening? I like that. Yeah. All right. So to cap off, we have one more episode that's gonna kind of culminate everything all together so beautifully, and that's building a legacy or facilitating leadership through marriage, or a legacy that you're wanting to have or write for your own family, right? And that starts with you as the individual. So within this episode, we're going to kind of touch on building that legacy, right? You know, taking that pen and writing, beginning to write your story, you know, the stroke of how you want to articulate, you know, who you're turning out to be, who you're changing to be, right? And the person or the people that you want to share your life and your leadership with. And then the legacy that you're wanting to leave back, so that when the next generation, you know, rises up, they can look at your dossier of how you've led, and they say, man, I want to lead the way Stephen led. Yeah. I want to lead the way Akko led. Or, unfortunately, for some others, it might be, I don't want to lead how Stephen led. I want to learn from how Stephen led and do it better. Or I don't want to lead how Akko led. I want to learn what the things that he did good and the things that he struggled with, and I want to do it better. Yeah. So we are going to kind of wrap up this whole idea and this whole topic of leadership through going through what does that look like legacy-wise, right? Because as we walk through our faith journey, there's that end goal. We know we're going to be reunited with our good and faithful Father, and we're going to stand at His feet, and He's going to look at us, and He's like, hey, what do you have to offer? And to some of us, He's going to be like, hey, welcome to my family, my good and faithful servant. And to others, what is He going to do? He'll say, hey, get out of here. I never knew you. I never knew you. You know, you don't have that legacy that is good or godly. Right. So we're going to touch on what does building a good, godly legacy look like through leadership, right? And that starts in the families. That starts in the individual. For those of us that are looking to be married. Yeah. How do you build that marriage even before you have a ring on your finger? Gosh, how do you build them? I mean, you've mentioned to the audience that you're in our marriage group and you don't even have a girlfriend, let alone you being engaged. Right. But how can you start building your husband years in your single years, right? How can you start building that legacy right now?
That's a really good question.
You know?
That's a really good question.
So we're going to touch on that.
I don't know if you want me to do it now.
Oh, you can share a little bit right now if you want, but for the guys and girls listening, that's our whole mindset behind this whole series of leadership that we're wanting to do. And I'm going to say it one more time. We're going to break it down in 5 topics or 5 episodes, and it's going to be foundations of leadership. It's going to be the cost of leadership.
Yes.
It's going to be the hierarchy of leadership, and then leading through change, and then capping it off with building a legacy and doing that through marriage or through the story that you want to write.
Yeah.
How does that sound, man?
That sounds perfect.
Excited?
I love this. I'm so excited for this. Oh my gosh, you guys have no idea.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for school, I'd be sitting here for 5 hours just going through all of these topics.
Yeah.
But I guess as we round off this episode, I mean, we came up with these topics, but what are you most excited out of like these? Which one are you most excited about?
Man, I'll tell you straight up. I love conversating on building a legacy and leadership through marriage. But I would say I'm still learning through that. I'm still growing through that. Yes, I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun conversation to go back and forth. But for me, it's leading through change. I think that's a relatively newer concept it's not a concept that I'm not familiar with and I don't know, but it's a concept that I'm experiencing right now. Thank you. That's a word that's really specific to what I'm going through right now. I'm seeing a lot of change happening, whether it's in my immediate family, maybe not in my job, but at church and different conversations and different communities that I'm surrounding myself with, right? So whether that change is big or minuscule, what does that look like? And I hinted at it before in this episode is what does it look like to progress in leadership or regress in leadership or even be stagnant? Because in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, I'm thinking if you're stagnant in your leadership, then you're regressing, right? And even within that, what's the difference between managing the situation that I'm in versus leading that situation that I'm in? So the reason why I'm mentioning that is because a lot of times when you're experiencing change, a lot of people that don't want that change to happen, they manage that situation rather than leading it to walk into that next step or that area that might be curiosity. That's a struggle. You don't know what's on the other side of that door. Right. So I'm really excited about the leading through change conversation and how that's gonna go. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. I'm really excited for the foundations. I'm very excited for the foundations. I think once because I have been reading about it, but ultimately I think it's really easy to again in the conversations we've had with some people, it's super easy for people to have ideas of what they want or ideas of the future of what they'd like, and the missing link that I'm seeing is how do I execute? How do I execute, or how do I make steps towards achieving what God is calling me towards?
Well, how do I begin?
How do I begin? And oftentimes I've seen individuals, and even myself, there's been times where, there's a time where you need someone to kind of tell you what to do, or tell you like, okay, I think this is your best next step. And I think part of kind of shifting gears in towards a leadership position is having moments of your time where you're saying, no, I'm ready to self-evaluate. I'm ready to kind of look at the big picture myself, and I can evaluate where I am going wrong and how I play a part in this whole big picture. And I think that's super important for anyone who like is, leading a group, leading themselves, or leading their marriage. It does you no good. And this is coming back to your favorite story in Genesis, chapter 3 that's the beginning of the blame game of you not wanting to be a leader. Adam blames his wife Eve. And that we see the downfall of the leader, and it actually, this is why I think it's important, it actually sets the tone for the next like thousands of years.
It does.
Right? And we don't actually get a shift in that until something fundamentally changes through our second Adam. So the fundamental principles and groundwork that you lay down in your foundations of how, like the rhythms of how you check on the land or how you till the land will determine the depth and spread of growth of your garden. And I think that's so important, because we talk so much about, bearing fruit for the Lord, and bearing fruit for others, but the land needs to be tilled.
Yeah, it does.
I think that's what a good leader does. Not only is able to evaluate it, but also get down and dirty and do the work as well.
Yeah. I think that's really good, man. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be a good conversation.
This is going to be good. I love it.
And honestly, what about you guys? You know, as you're listening to this or even watching this, be thinking of different questions or areas where you want to kind of discover more when you hear our perspectives and our conversation. And, if you know us in person, come talk to us in between episodes and say, hey, like, I heard you say this on the podcast, and tell me more about it. Or even if you don't know us personally or you're not here in the Kansas City area, shoot us an email. And I know we have an email through this podcast series, or even if you're watching this on YouTube, flood the comment sections on Spotify or Apple Music. We're definitely going to be looking at those areas and responding to them as they come. So we want this to be engaging. We don't just want this to be a one-on-one. Because another thing that we're thinking about is we're also going to have different, it's not confirmed yet of who is going to be sitting on this conversation with us, but we're definitely going to have...
We're going to have guest speakers. We're going to have guest speakers.
And individuals that I can already, like, for example, that last chapter, we may or may not have my wife sit in. If she's hearing this as she's editing, that's me telling her that she's gonna be on the final episode. But be on the lookout for things like that. And if you have any conversations or responses that you want to bring to the table, please do. Even if this is way after all these podcasts are already out and you still have a question, we'll try to respond and answer them in any way we can. But with that, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. I know we've been very sporadic in getting these episodes out, but thank you for being patient with us, and thank you for just joining us and being a part of this community that we're trying to build. Yeah. And we appreciate you listening and you engaging with us through just listening to our conversations and our thought processes, and we really, really appreciate you guys.
Yeah. So. No, I couldn't have said it better myself. That was great. Yeah. So says the not eloquent person. That was great.
But we appreciate you guys. Stay tuned for the next episode. It's going to be the first topic of building a foundation in leadership, or discovering foundation in leadership. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah. We love you guys. See you on the flip side. Peace out.
Peace.